Там просто летит что-то. А, да. Вот мигает же. Да. Бля, хули мы так высовываемся?
Chaos has arrived at Putin's palace.
Хуя себе.
Vladimir Putin's quarter-century illusion of stability and power exploded in the skies over Moscow on the night of October 31st, 2025. Vladimir Putin was preparing a grand stage for the November 4th Unity Day celebrations.
Речь идет о испытании крылатой ракеты неограниченной дальности «Буревестник» с ядерной энергетической установкой.
On October 27th, he challenged the world with his Skyfall nuclear-powered missile, which he touted as invincible, with a range of 14,000 kilometers. That same day, in the gilded halls of the Kremlin, he was shaking hands with North Korean diplomats, celebrating a new world order. But on the night of October 31st, 2025, Putin's flashy nuclear fantasy turned into bitter irony amid the flames of a transformer wreck just 30 kilometers from Moscow. Ukraine had gifted Putin's Unity Day party with an early fireworks display. While Putin was working on his show of force to the world, Ukraine's Neptune missiles and hundreds of drones plunged his capital into darkness. While Putin sold his people the lie that the war is far away, the capital is safe, 224,000 people in Zhukovsky and Ramenskoye, near the Kremlin, were plunged into chaos reminiscent of a horror movie, with their homes, streets and parks flickering on and off like disco lights. Putin's invincible missile failed to protect the 750 kilovolt Vladimirskaya transformer station that feeds the heart of Moscow. Putin's strategic genius failed to prevent Ukraine from destroying the Koltsevoy Ring fuel pipeline, the lifeblood of his army. At this facility, allegedly protected by drone-proof nets and militarized guards, 3 lines carrying 3 million tons of jet fuel per year exploded simultaneously. This is one of Putin's greatest humiliations. It was the tragicomic portrait of a leader who, while his people froze in the dark, resorted to technical failure lies, but sold nuclear war to the world. What happened on the night of October 31st was not a random drone attack or chaotic harassment fire. It was a cold-blooded, surgical execution plan designed to paralyze Moscow's nervous system, advancing from 3 different vectors. The Neptune missiles targeted the Oryol thermal power plant and the Novobryansk transformer station. These targets were not chosen at random. These power plants were a regional brain. These facilities supplied energy to military-industrial plants, Rostec factories and armored vehicle repair centers in the Oryol and Bryansk regions that directly produced for the Russian war machine. Neptune's strike not only turned off the lights, it may also have halted tank and missile production lines. The second layer of the attack came with swarms of giant drones. The Russian Defense Ministry's panicked statement that they shot down 98 UAVs suggests the real number could be much higher. Some open-source intelligence, OSINT analysts and local reports claim this number is in the hundreds. Amid this chaos, the main target was hit, the 750 kilovolt Vladimirskaya transformer station. This was a specific target. This transformer is not an ordinary distribution point. With a capacity of 4,010 megavolt amperes, this station was one of the main arteries of Moscow's energy grid. It served as a vital heart valve, receiving high-voltage energy from massive production facilities such as the Smolensk nuclear power plant and the Kostroma thermal power plant, and distributing it to the Moscow metropolitan area. The destruction of this valve paralyzed the capital's energy circulation and instantly plunged 224,000 people into darkness. The 224,000 people left in the dark were only the visible face of this domino effect. This figure represents thousands of households on the brink of collapse in terms of heating, water, and communications infrastructure as winter approaches. However, this region is no ordinary settlement. The targeted city of Zhukovsky is the heart of Russia's aviation and space research. It is home to the Gromov Flight Research Institute and the test facilities of Russia's leading aircraft design bureaus, Sukhoi, MiG. Therefore, the attack on the Vladimirskaya transformer not only turned off the lights in homes, it may also have cut off power to some of Russia's most sensitive military research and development centers. This is not just a civilian issue, but a military technological one. The facilities where Putin develops his new generation weapons were crippled by an old generation problem in their own capital: power outages. The second and more dangerous domino was military logistics. The destruction of the Ring, Koltsevoy pipeline, is a disaster scenario for Putin's massive military apparatus around Moscow. This pipeline was not a supply route, but a lifeline. Cutting this pipeline means that strategic air bases around Moscow, such as Kubinka, Zhukovsky, and other centers connected to the main lines, leading to Engels, would immediately face a fuel crisis. These bases house strategic bombers taking off from deep within Russia to launch missile strikes on Ukraine, or fighter squadrons tasked with protecting the capital. Halting the fuel flow directly threatens the operational capacity of these fleets. The third domino was the power plants in Oryol and Novobryansk, which were hit by Neptune missiles. These attacks struck deep into Russia's war economy. These power plants directly supplied electricity to military industrial facilities in the region. These facilities are where tanks to be sent to the front are refurbished, missiles are assembled, or ammunition is produced. The shutdown of these power plants means production lines stop, welding machines fall silent, and the production of critical components is delayed. Ukraine is targeting not only the current Russian army, but also the future Russian army. When these three dominoes, civil paralysis, military logistical paralysis, and industrial paralysis, fell together, it became clear that the October 31 attack was not only a psychological victory, but also a heavy strategic blow to Moscow's war machine. So what were the Kremlin and Russian officials doing in the meantime? The power of a regime is measured not only by its military hardware, but also by the consistency of the narrative it tells in times of crisis. On the night of October 31st, Putin's propaganda machine collapsed faster and more loudly than the Vladimirskaya transformer. When the attack began around 11 p.m. and Moscow's suburbs were plunged into darkness, the initial response of local authorities revealed the standard reflex of the Russian system: denial. Independent sources report that the Zhukovsky Regional Administration issued a cold, bureaucratic statement describing the situation as an emergency in the power grid and a technical malfunction, while 224,000 people were in a state of panic. This is a classic Soviet-style cover-up attempt. The goal is not to explain the truth, but to suppress panic and buy time for the Kremlin to figure out what happened. The technical malfunction lie was a pathetic attempt showing that the regime preferred to play dumb with its people rather than admit that the war had reached the capital. However, in the age of Telegram and social media in 2025, the life of this lie was measured in minutes. Before the technical malfunction lie could fully circulate, a surprising confession came just 40 minutes later from Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin. Sobyanin announced on his official Telegram channel that a drone was shot down as it approached the capital. This statement immediately discarded the local government's technical malfunction narrative. Sobyanin later increased this number to 11. Why would a mayor admit to a drone attack before the defense ministry or the Kremlin? This points to two possibilities. Either the crisis was so great that Sobyanin chose to appear honest to save himself from public wrath, realizing the technical malfunction lie was unsustainable, or there was a breakdown in coordination between different wings of the regime: municipality, military, intelligence during the crisis. In either case, the regime's ability to speak with a single voice in a crisis was gone that night. After a night of chaos, on the morning of November 1st, the Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, stepped in to declare its own victory. According to a report by RBC Ukraine, the ministry claimed that exactly 98 UAVs had been shot down in 10 different regions. This statement was more of a smokescreen to conceal the scale of the disaster than an announcement of success. If all 98 UAVs were shot down, then what hit the 750 kilovolt Vladimirskaya transformer station squarely? Who blew up the Koltsevoy pipeline? And what about the Oryol and Novobryansk power plants hit by Neptune missiles? The Defense Ministry's statement did not even mention the existence of these missiles. The 98 UAVs claim shows that the regime was forced to admit to a massive wave of attacks, but tried to rebrand the strategic destruction caused by this attack as an air defense victory. This was an admission of failure. Amid all these contradictory and panicked statements, the comment by Lieutenant General Kovalenko, head of Ukraine's Disinformation Response Center, provided the clearest summary of the situation. The Moscow region is losing light. This brief and cold statement expressed more than a military reality. It conveyed psychological superiority. Moscow was losing light, not only physically but also in Putin's propaganda war. History is written by leaders' reactions in moments of crisis. The night of October 31st, 2025, revealed the purest form of Vladimir Putin's tragicomedy, particularly the collapse of the capital's internal front. This is the anatomy of the weakness of a leader who is disconnected from his people, trapped in a false reality of his own creation. Just 4 days earlier, Putin was living in a completely different universe. He was boasting to the world about his invincible 14,000-kilometer range nuclear-powered missile, Skyfall. He claimed this missile could overcome all current and future missile defense systems. On the same day, he was celebrating his unbreakable alliance with North Korean diplomats and the New World Order. This is precisely the tragedy of Putin. A leader boasting about overcoming future missile defense systems was forced to watch as his capital's current air defense system was torn to shreds by Ukraine's Neptune missiles and low-tech drone swarms. While trying to sell nuclear war to the world, he couldn't provide his own people with electricity and heat. Putin's tacit social contract with the Russian people has always been based on a simple equation. Give me political obedience, and I will provide you with stability and security. On the night of October 31st, 2025, this contract was torn up in Moscow. Just like in Belgorod, stability is gone. Putin's promise of an untouchable capital and a safe homeland to Muscovites was shattered under the wreckage of the Vladimirskaya transformer and the Koltsavoy ring pipeline. And what was Putin's priority while this disaster was unfolding? His priority was to prepare pre-recorded, reality-detached speeches about the mission of Russian civilization for Unity Day on November 4th. While Muscovites were freezing in the dark, Putin was talking about geopolitical victories in a fake reality of his own creation. The concrete panic and civil drama experienced by the people could not penetrate the Kremlin's wall of propaganda. This is not just a military failure, it is also a leadership failure. It is the final act of a leader who has lost touch with his people and is powerless. It is important to understand the military and social aftershocks these attacks will create in the Kremlin. The attack on the Vladimirskaya transformer station on October 31st was a litmus test that exposed Putin's infrastructural fragility. However, the real reason for the destruction caused by this attack was not only the success of Ukrainian drones, but also the fact that the Russian power grid was already rotten from within. Putin's nightmare is not just external attacks. The real catastrophe is that the system is already collapsing under its own weight. A report allegedly leaked or obtained by Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, confronts the Kremlin with this grim reality. According to the report, Russia's unified power grid was already in the throes of a systemic crisis before these attacks. Western sanctions have cut off access to critical technologies, spare parts, and maintenance services provided by companies like Siemens or ABB. Worn-out Soviet-era equipment is being forced to operate without these critical components. The result? According to the report, there is a massive capacity gap of 25 gigawatts, GW, in the grid, equivalent to approximately 9% of total capacity. This is not a technical detail. It is a ticking time bomb. This is mathematical proof of how close Russia is to experiencing a blackout on its own, without Ukraine even needing to send a single drone. A 25-gigawatt shortfall is a disaster waiting to happen, potentially leaving millions of people without heat, electricity, or water in the middle of winter. You don't even need Ukrainian intelligence reports to see this systemic decay. Just 3 days before the October 31st attack, on October 28th, events on the island of Sakhalin in Russia's Far East were like a rehearsal for this collapse. A malfunction, comically explained by officials as a broken lightning protection cable, cut off power to the entire island. Sakhalin was left without electricity, heating, or water for hours. If a broken cable can paralyze an entire island, imagine what a coordinated attack by Ukraine's hundreds of drones and cruise missiles could do. This is what makes the October 31st attack so dangerous. Ukraine attacked not a healthy system, but one that was already in intensive care, operating at 9% capacity, 25 gigawatts, a system collapsing under broken cables. Putin's promise of stability is as fragile as a broken cable. The attack on the Vladimirskaya transformer may have lit the fuse on this 25 gigawatt time bomb. In the coming winter months, the cascade effect triggered by these attacks could lead to scenes like frozen schools in Podolsk or collapsed heating systems in Belgorod being experienced directly in Moscow. This is not a military defeat, but a civilian apocalypse scenario. To fully understand the strategic weight of the October 31st attack, we need to look beyond the civilian chaos caused by the Vladimirskaya transformer station, which reveals an even more dire situation for the Kremlin. The Koltsevoy, or Ring pipeline. The Ukrainian military intelligence GUR's choice of this target was a calculated step aimed at changing the course of the war. As the GUR itself stated, this operation was designed to create a result more effective than sanctions. The Koltsevoy pipeline is also the aorta of the Moscow military district. It is a closed-loop pipeline system, approximately 400 kilometers long, encircling the capital like a ring. The purpose of this system is to take processed petroleum products from Russia's large refineries, particularly the Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, and Kapotnya refineries in Moscow, and distribute them directly to the most critical assets of the Moscow military district. These assets include dual-purpose, civilian and military, airports such as Domodedovo, Vnukovo, and Zhukovsky, as well as secret fuel terminals supplying the S-400 batteries, logistics depots, and armored unit garrisons around the capital. To understand why this target is more effective than sanctions, one need only look at the numbers. This pipeline alone has the capacity to transport over 3 million tons of aviation fuel, jet fuel, annually. This constitutes a significant portion of the fuel required for the operations of all fighter fleets protecting Moscow and the strategic bombers striking Ukraine. In addition, the system pumps 2.8 million tons of diesel fuel for tanks, armored vehicles, military trucks, and generators, and 1.6 million tons of gasoline for general-purpose military vehicles and administrative support annually. If the GUR strikes this line, it would be like a bridge collapses, 160 kilometers of winding roads, fuel tankers stuck in mud, no fuel reaching tanks at the front, internal halted. However, the destruction of the Koltsevoy line is a much larger version of this scenario. Without this route, the Russian army would suddenly have to revert to 19th century logistics. They would have to attempt to transport millions of tons of fuel without the efficiency and secrecy of pipelines, using railway tank cars or road tankers. However, these alternative routes are both slow and have now become easy targets for Ukraine's long-range drones and partisan sabotage. This is not just the loss of a facility, but a strategic choke point that could paralyze the entire operational tempo of the Moscow military district. In short, on the night of October 31, 2025, Ukraine prematurely celebrated Putin's November 4th Unity Day celebrations by crippling Moscow's infrastructure. The Vladimirskaya transformer, the energy heart of the capital, was silenced. The Ring fuel pipeline, the lifeblood of the Moscow military, was cut off by GUR operators. While Putin threatened the world with his invincible Skyfall nuclear missile, he left 224,000 of his own citizens trapped in the cold and darkness of the capital. Thank you for choosing us.